So skin in the game, I guess the main concept is to be exposed to downsides as much as you are to upside.
Okay.
So whenever you're engaging, for example, in transaction or if you're advocating for something, you need to be exposed to the consequences of whatever you're advocating becoming a reality.
Okay.
One of the ways to just conceptualize that is don't give advice that you don't follow yourself.
Okay.
So a good example of skin in the game in financial advice would be to say, this is what's in my portfolio.
Yeah.
I wouldn't tell people you should invest in this, you should invest in that. This altcoin has this feature, looks promising. Like, I don't want to know what you think. I want to know what you are actually doing. Skin in the game is actually a pretty ancient concept, but it really came into full force with Nassim Taleb's book of the same name, Skin in the Game.
Okay.
And Nassim Taleb is probably more famous for having written the book Black Swan. And whenever you hear the phrase like Bitcoin's a black swan or the financial collapse of 2008 was a black swan, that's a concept invented by Nassim Taleb, which basically means an unpredictable event that has dramatic consequences that nobody can foresee. If you've ever heard the term antifragile, again, people saying Bitcoin is antifragile and the banks are a fragile system, again, Nassim Taleb invented this concept, and this concept means that a system will grow and become more secure, more robust as it is exposed to volatility and shock. So kind of like, imagine like a human bone that breaks. When it heals, the bone is actually stronger than it was before. So the human body, the human bone is anti-fragile. And think about, for example, on the contrary, if you put a child in a bubble, if you have like a bubble child, bubble boy, he is not exposed to volatility and stress. He's protected from that, and he becomes more fragile over time.
Yeah.
Because
should that protection ever be removed?
Exactly. So it's the same reason why everybody knows if you drop the pacifier, you don't clean it up before you give it back to your kid, because that's how kids get their immune system. They're exposed to all these bacteria and viruses, and when they're young, but they build up antibodies and immunity so that if they ever get really sick, they will survive.
Yeah.
So skin in the game is an ethical philosophy on how to live your life, which is exposing yourself to the downsides and not outsourcing or externalizing the downsides or the risk on other people.
Okay.
That's not fair. There's a symmetry between your reward and your risk, and you're not breaking that symmetry by obfuscating information or creating a system where someone else is going to have to bail you out, and that someone else doesn't have the same exposure to the upside as you do. So as a business philosophy, it's also similar to an individual philosophy. For example, as a business philosophy, skin in the game for us means that Dave and I self-finance our businesses since the beginning. So we put in our own money into those companies, knowing that if our companies fail, we're losing Bitcoins.
Yeah.
We're losing Bitcoins that we otherwise could have just sat on. So that's a huge risk. And because we have this massive exposure to the downside, we're very, very careful about how we conduct our business. And we're very thoughtful in planning for the long term. Another way that we display skin in the game as a company is people will notice that on the Bull Bitcoin website, where people are actually trading, you can see my face and Dave's face.
Yeah.
It means that we are staking our reputation very, very closely to the performance of the service. That means that if ever there's a bug, if you lose money, if something bad happens on the platform, you'll just see my smirking face on there, and you'll be very angry at me and very angry at Dave.
Yeah.
But in the same way, if we are able to offer a service that we are proud of, that is efficient, that is seamless, and people go on the platform and they just can't believe how incredible this was. They also see our face there. And so we are exposed to this positive upside to creating this great app. And we're going to reap the benefits personally of having created this great app, but we're also personally exposed to the downside. Bull Bitcoin sticking to Canada as a local market, combined with the fact that we are putting our faces on this website, what does that imply? Well, that means that every time we go to a Bitcoin meetup, and we organize Bitcoin meetups all over the country all the time, everybody that's coming up to us in the meetup, they're clients of ours.
Yeah.
And when they have an issue with the platform, they tell me, and that keeps us in check. Imagine, for example, that Coinbase does something that Canadian users don't like. What's the likelihood that you're going to be able to see Brian Armstrong face to face and tell him to his face and have a really uncomfortable conversation? So by putting our face on the website and going to the meetups, we are guaranteeing ourselves some pretty awkward and pretty hard conversations with users, and that keeps us in check. So it's much less likely that a local municipal politician, for example, will do something that will negatively impact his community because he has to live in that community.
Yeah.
He has friends in that community and he has family in that community. That's the same thing for us. Like, if we do a bad job, then all our users, many of the users are our friends. Maybe of the users are business partners. We have our family members as users. We have ourselves as users. So because we have in mind this user base, which is very close to us, both geographically, and we are exposing ourselves by going out there, we are heavily incentivized to not screw up, because if we do, we're going to get a very, very large pushback that foreign companies that are not exposed to Canada, they will not get. It's not intuitive to think that trust is so important in Bitcoin, because it is a trustless system, but it is just a fact that before we reach this hyper-Bitcoinization phase where everyone's using Bitcoin, you're going to have to trust third parties at some point. There is no decentralized software that is able to transform Bitcoin to fiat. There needs to be one human that will take the counterparty of a trade and to physically exchange Bitcoins for fiat at some point. On bills, for example, when you're paying bills with Bitcoin, we're not custodian of your Bitcoin. You send the Bitcoins to us, they become our Bitcoins right away, and there's a bill payment or a fiat payment that's initiated right away. So we're not custodian. However, in between the time where you send the Bitcoins and receive the payment, you're still trusting us
to send the payment.
To send the payment, exactly. So having a reputation of being trustworthy and maintaining that over time it's immeasurable value for us.
Now, you mentioned a few books there, just for people watching that want to do some reading on the topic. Where can they look?
I think the obvious answer is to read the book Skin in the Game. And for people that may want to go deeper, I would suggest start by reading Antifragile before, to really get the conceptual underpinnings of Skin in the Game. Skin in the Game is an ethical philosophy on how to live your life in this chaotic world. And if you want to understand why it's so important to live your life this way, and why it's important for a lot of us to live our life this way, to have a good system, a good society, then you should read Antifragile, which really highlights the problems that we have today, problems that are solved if enough of us conduct our life with skin in the game as an ethical driver.
Awesome.